Welcome to the Flex Rental Solutions webinar today. Today we're going to be talking about how to do inventory counts in Flex. There's a couple different ways you can do it. The one that we'll look at second is with a full scheduled inventory count. But you can also do a spot check. So for example, you could just go to any inventory item, and let's look at a non-serialized item first. And you can easily just change the quantities of the item by clicking the change quantities, and you can just go out on your shelf and say we're working from the Utah location and just say I only count 4 and I know we're supposed to have 5, and click update, something like that. For a serialized item, let's look at this jazz bass, which is serialized. You can see they're kind of spread out between Utah, Denver, and on a couple of jobs. But what you can do is click Reset for Physical Count and choose the location that you want to reset for. Let's do the Utah location. And what this will do is show either the last job that this was scanned out to, or just show it as manually removed from inventory. And then at this point, what you would do is go through and do a free scan in of all of the ones that you physically have in your warehouse. So that will return those to the warehouse, and anything you didn't scan will show where it was last. So that's how you can do that with a serialized item. Those are just kind of spot check methods. You might want to do that every once in a while. You might have a system where you do that at certain intervals. But to do your full end of year or maybe mid-year inventory count, that's when you would use a scheduled inventory count. So on the inventory menu, click Scheduled Inventory Counts. In this particular system, we have a lot of test counts. A lot of them are still open and haven't been reconciled yet. Your system shouldn't have many open or unreconciled counts, but you can go and enclose older ones, and it shouldn't do anything to your current inventory counts. For now, let's create a new scheduled inventory count. Let's call this end of year 2014 for, I created a test location specifically for inventory counts. The opening date, let's say that it's today, because you'll see that the count will become available under the warehouse menu only after the opening day and time has passed. So we'll do it for today so that we can actually access that inventory count. The closing date will just be whenever the closing date is. It won't show up on the warehouse menu anymore. A lot of people will just do this open-ended, either do the end of December or sometime in January, so maybe they could still finish early into the early part of the year. So we'll click Add, and that will bring us to the inventory count page. You don't have to do anything here yet. The way that you access the count is by going to the warehouse menu, then looking at your current counts, and you can see any count that you currently have open. This is just a scan history from, I was doing some free scan in earlier. This doesn't have anything to do with this current count. So I just have a cheat sheet open since I don't have an actual warehouse and I don't have actual equipment sitting in front of me since this is just a test system. I just have a cheat sheet with about a dozen items, some serialized, some non-serialized. And I just want to go through and scan those and show you how this inventory count process works. So I'm going to start by scanning. Let me get clicked in the right window. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and scan some of these line array speakers. And I just scanned 4 out of the 4 that I'm supposed to own. So keep that in mind for when we go to the reconciliation sheet. Then you'll see what happens if you don't scan something that you're supposed to or that's expected to be scanned. you'll see how you can deal with that. I'll also scan the one Yamaha LS9 that we own. I'm going to scan 3 of these Verilight spots, but the system is expecting me to scan 4. I'm only going to scan 3 though, and we'll see how that works in the reconciliation process. Same with the next item, a MacBook Pro. I own 2 of these, but I'm only going to scan the 1. And now let's go back to that Fender standard fretless bass, which was non-serialized. We have 5 in this particular location, but let's say that we only counted 4. Again, just so we can see how the reconciliation process works. And then our last item is a non-serialized 3-pin XLR cable. Currently in the system, there are 25 available out of 27 that we're supposed to own. But let's say that we only counted in the warehouse, and all of our jobs are back, we only counted 23. So those are all of the items that I have in the warehouse. You'll notice that it only gives me a 75% complete, because that's calculating based on how many items it's expecting. So the fact that I missed scanning one of these Verilights, one of the MacBooks, one of the bases, and several of these cables, that is just saying you only have 75% of what we're expecting to see. One thing I forgot to mention is that you should definitely make sure your current location matches up with the location that you are scanning. If it doesn't, then you can just click Change and choose the new location. Okay, so now that I'm done with the scanning process, I'm going to close that window, and then we'll go back to the end of year test here. If I reload this tab, you can see that it changed to in progress because I started scanning. Now that I'm done, then I will click Close. And what this is going to do is do a closeout count. And this will take a minute or two, depending on the amount of items that you have in your entire system. You can hit refresh to see the progress. You can see this is going down pretty fast. So this should be available, available in just a minute. But if we go back to the main page here and reload, and look at the end of year for the test location, you can see the close is in progress. And once that is officially closed, you'll see a little reconcile option right here, which is where we're going to go to next. So let's see what our progress is. That should be done in probably just about 20 more seconds. One thing that I will mention at this point, I am doing this test in a QA system that we have here at Flex that is about 1, maybe even 2 versions ahead of what most customers are using. Most customers at this point, at the time of this video, are using 4.10.3.1 version of Flex. The system I'm using right now is running 4.10.4, I believe. And what that means is that we have some of the newer features that we're programming in this version right now that are going through the QA process. So when I go now that this close has finished, I can go to the reconcile screen. You're going to see a little bit different of a reconcile screen right now than what you might be seeing if you're viewing this in the first couple weeks of December. We're probably going to push these updates to customers pretty soon, so by near the end of December you should see your reconciliation screen looking like this. But just as an example, let me go to my test system, which is still running 4.10.3. And I'll just show you what it currently looks like versus what it's going to look like and explain why we made some of the changes that we did. So if I go to the reconcile screen for any of these, what you're going to see is the only option you have up here, the view option, is to show either all reconciled or unreconciled. And it's going to load every single item on the list at one time. I don't have a lot of items in this test system, so it didn't take that long, but some of our customers have thousands and thousands of items, and they were saying that that loading process would hang for 5, 10, even more minutes sometimes, and they could never really get into it. So what we did in the test system, if I go back over to this tab, now when you open the reconciliation screen, it doesn't load all the items at once. What we have now is a filter where you type in each inventory group and it will pull up any of the elements, or sorry, not elements, but the items that were found within that group that are pending reconciliation. Right now it's only showing unreconciled, but I could also go in and say show me all. So that means it's showing everything that I scanned plus things that I didn't scan. So right here you can see it was expecting 27. I only counted 23. I also have some microphones that I didn't scan at all. But these other ones you can see that they were fully counted and we're just viewing it just as a reference. So if I want to go back to just showing unreconciled, we can do that as well. So again, the difference between the current version as of the first couple weeks of December is it loads everything at once, and this is your only filter. But now, in the later part of December and onwards, you should have this filter. You can include return dates and last known locations if those are applicable. That will probably show more information in your live systems than it will in my test system here, because you actually have your gear going to actual locations, etc. In my system, most of this gear is just used for testing purposes, and we don't actually scan it out to jobs very frequently. So your system should show a little bit more information when you do that. So what you can do is either type just one, then you can exit and type in another. So if I want to look at my computers next, or I can have all of them on the screen at once. So I had some lighting items. I also had some items in my bases folder. One thing that we're going to be adding to this screen is a button that you can just click that will show all groups. We had a few requests for that after we first demoed this. Some people don't mind maybe having to wait a few seconds for everything to load. So they just said, give me a button where I could just click show all groups and it will show everything. So that will be in an even more future update, but that should be there pretty soon. I'm going to go ahead and again just filter showing all items that I scanned. Excuse me. So to start the reconciliation process, really what you're doing here is just looking at the counts that you actually scanned during the scheduled inventory scan, and it's showing any discrepancies. So if there's less than what was expected, for example, on this serialized item, you can open up and look at the details and look at this particular barcode was not scanned. And again, if this had been scanned to a job, this would show its last known location. But since it's my test system, it's just showing the warehouse right now. Or maybe it could be the last known location was the warehouse, and maybe it was stolen from the warehouse, or an employee took it home and didn't scan it out, or something like that. So it still could say the warehouse, but a lot of times it might say the last job that it was scanned out on. So you can see the items the barcodes that we actually scanned have a 1 out of 1 and a green check mark to say that it's reconciled, it's good to go. Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see all of it. But then we have a little icon here that's saying this still needs to be reconciled. So what you do here is click on that icon, and it gives you a few different options here. You can mark it as presumed missing, you could delete it altogether, or you can say that it's accounted for. Just say, oh, we actually found it between when we closed the count and now. So now we can say, let's just mark it as accounted for because it's actually here. So let's do that for this one. Another thing I'll mention is that we are still putting this new reconciliation method through QA. So there might be a couple of longer hang times, but all of that should be ironed out by the time we release this to customers. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to reload this entire system so we don't have to wait for that to come out. And let's go back to the reconciliation screen for this count. And we'll go back and do all of the filter settings that we had. Audio, computers, what else do we have? Lighting and bases. And what you'll see is this actually did go through with the method that we told it to. Like I said, it was just hanging for a little while there, and that should be fixed by the time we push it to customers. So the mixers, these were all reconciled. Won't have to worry about that. Same with the speakers. Let's look at the signal cable that had a quantity counted less than the quantity expected. For non-serialized, you have a couple different options here. You can say mark accounted for, and really what it will do is just take the quantity counted up to the last known available quantity. So I had 25 out of 27 before I started this count. If I click mark accounted for, it will just keep it as 25 out of 27. Again, maybe I found the extra 2 that I was missing between the time that I finished the scan and now. So that would be one reason that you would click mark accounted for. Or you can say adjust quantities, and this is where you would adjust based on what you counted. If you're pretty sure that those last few cables are lost, maybe on a job and you're never going to see them again, and you just want to adjust your quantity once and for all, you could do it from right here. So I'll click adjust quantities, type in the right quantities there, and click reconcile. And again, it looks like it's going to hang for a second, but I think I saw it actually update in the background. So let's just reload one more time. And again, just let me reiterate that we will get these issues fixed out before we push it out. Let's go back to reconcile, and let's look at the bases this time. Again, on this one, you could mark accounted for and say we actually found the last one, or I could adjust the quantities to say 4 out of 4. I'll just cancel that for now so we don't get stuck on the screen again. So that's the reconciliation process. Once you're done with that, you would close. You can reopen the actual count and then say mark as reconciled. Really all this is doing is just giving it a status. If you still have things that you didn't reconcile in that count, clicking mark reconciled isn't going to automatically reconcile everything in that count and throw off your quantities. Really all it's doing is just saying on this screen, when we look at this, it's just going to say, oh, it's reconciled. Whoever was in charge of this went in and already did everything that they were going to do. So now that that is reconciled, we can go and look at the items that we did reconcile. So for example, the cable, let's look at that 25 footer. You can see that the quantity was reduced to what I typed in as I was adjusting the quantity. We didn't do this for the computers. That's one thing that I meant to do, but I forgot to do that while we were reconciling. But if I were to have marked one of these as presumed missing, so for example, if I go into the... So for example, I only scanned one of these, but because I didn't do anything on the reconcile screen, it's still saying 2 out of 2. So that's just an example of how, even though I marked it as reconciled and it's closed, the quantity didn't do anything, and it won't do anything until I actually go open the reconciliation screen and manually make those changes. So I could even do this. I could reopen it. It says it's pending reconciliation now. Let's reload the tab so I can get this. And let's look at my computers. And since this is serialized, we'll open up and look and see we only had 1 scanned out of the 2, and here's the one that was not counted. So if I click the reconcile button, I could say mark as presumed missing. and that time it didn't hang. So that's what it will look like once we get that bug fixed out. So, but now if we go back and reload, then you see the quantity has been reduced, and there's one that is now marked as presumed missing. So again, that was just an example of how you can actually go back and mark it as, or pending reconciliations too. So mark unreconciled. Go back, make some changes, and then mark it as reconciled again. You can still actually reopen the count. So let's say you accidentally closed it and you still had a bunch of stuff to scan. You can reopen it. And I don't know, you might have to refresh the browser just so that you can see it on the warehouse screen again, because it looks like it's pulling stale data. But since I reopened that count, it shows up on the current counts again. And you can see that it's left off after that 75%, and then I reconciled a few items, so now this is almost 85% complete. And then what I would do is go back to scheduled inventory counts as soon as I'm done scanning, and you can close it again. And it will go through that pending items calculation, and then I can go back to the screen here, click reconcile the last few items, and then click mark reconciled as soon as that process is done. So that is the full inventory process. We do realize that everybody kind of has a different way of doing this. You might run into different issues. So if you do have any issues, please email support@flexrentalsolutions.com, and we can help you out with that. Also, this is going to be posted in our forum. I don't have that open right now, but if you go to our forum, forum.flexrentalsolutions.com, and then open the webinars board, then you'll find a post about this. This is where the video will be posted, and people will be asking questions and getting answers right there on the forum as well. The forum's really great for if you want answers from other users that might have run into some of the problems that you have. So forum is a great resource. I highly recommend checking that out. But again, as always, any questions at all, please email support@flexrentalsolutions.com.